Oh, man. All right.
Too cheesy?
Yeah, you should do it. It's going to be cheesy, but you should do it. And I'll make it. Yeah.
I love the cheese.
Yeah. That's perfect. Then I can make fun of you for dad jokes. Welcome back to the big half-century mark, episode 50 of Acquired, the podcast about technology, acquisitions, and IPOs. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. So today we are doing a classic episode of Acquired. It's the reason we started the show. It's the original format. It's one we've been talking about doing for a long time, and it's one that we've probably had, 20, 30 requests for this since we started the show. Finally, we are covering, it's an Apple episode, so we have to say finally, we are covering the acquisition of Beats by Apple in 2014 for $3 billion.
I'm so excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. I wish I wasn't a little under the weather for it, but listeners, bear with me. I know I'm a little nasally this episode.
You're like, this is going to be like Michael Jordan in Game 6 of the finals playing with the flu. It's like, you're going to rise to the occasion, Ben.
Thank you, David.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep. It's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do, operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like tabular review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right, David, that is all I've got between us and
I can't wait.
And Beats.
I am ready to start. I almost started talking over you.
That would be new.
That would not be new. All right, let's do it. So this is probably, certainly thus far, the coolest founding story on Acquired. Maybe as long as we do the show, it's going to be hard to find a cooler founding story than
I don't think that's possible.
I don't think it's going to be possible. And certainly the coolest founders. So Beats was founded in 2006 by Jimmy Iovine and Andre Young. And those names may mean something to you, or they may not, but they certainly will in a minute. So Jimmy Iovine, who is Jimmy? Who is this guy? Well, he's a music producer and an executive. He started as a sound engineer early in his career. He dropped out of college. He grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn. His dad was a longshoreman. And he loved music, was obsessed with music. He eventually rises and he becomes the head of Interscope Records. But this guy, he is a legend. And there's a great documentary about him and his co-founder, who we'll get into in a minute, called The Defiant Ones on HBO. Highly recommend watching.
I had a chance to watch some of it preparing for this episode, and Jimmy is the actual coolest person alive.
So the first album that he works on is, I think, John Lennon's first solo album as a studio engineer. Then he works on Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run album. Then he starts working with Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty. He actually dates Stevie Nicks in the 70s. Like, how awesome is that? And he's responsible for Stop Dragging My Heart Around, Tom Petty song. So Jimmy is like, Stevie's doing her first solo album. Like, she needs a single. Like, Tom, do this with Stevie. And boom, Stop Dragging My Heart Around. But he doesn't stop there. He discovers U2. So like, that's him. He discovers No Doubt, Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, and then he completely reinvents himself. So Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, 50 Cent, Lady Gaga, Kendrick Lamar, these are all products of Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah, very similar sound, right? You understand how the same person could be responsible for all these artists.
Just amazing. He does the soundtrack for 16 Candles, many other movies. And then founds, Interscope Records along the way that, all these artists are on. Probably you could make an argument that there is no more important figure in popular music, of the last century. That's how big his impact is. So his co-founder, Andre Young, who's that guy? Well, it turns out, as he says, lots of people say that they forgot about Dre. Andre Young is David. Dr. Dre.
Oh, David.
I couldn't help myself there. So probably Jimmy's most favorite or most known for musical collaboration and business collaboration is with Dr. Dre. Dre, started his musical career as actually part of the world-class Wrecking Crew, I think, originally, and then was a member of NWA. And, their, huge rise to prominence. And there's, many movies have been made about Dre and NWA. And
there's a great, and I'm sure this is covered in lots of places, but in the HBO documentary, there's a great piece about how Dre basically gets on stage at this like, emerging nightclub for West Coast hip hop. And he's the first person, after experimenting a ton with a sort of like mixer turntable combination. He sort of builds all the stuff on his own and assembles it. And he's doing it in his house, and his mom buys him this little mixer. And he's the first person to basically mix two different tempo songs, rather than just like fading one into the other or lining up two that are very similar BPM. And it's like an old 60s hit with new hip hop song, and the audience does, like, no one knows what to do. Like, he just like created this new thing, which of course we hear all the time now, that's sampled and mixed across decades and mixed from different tempos. But he gets up there and like no one can believe it. No one knows what to do. He just like created this new thing that no one even knows how to dance to. And as someone that, you know who Dr. Dre is, but you don't know what his sort of origin story is. It's just amazing to it's a great documentary. I can't recommend it enough. So great.
And Dre is like, he's the whole image, like, this is why he's Dr. Dre. Like, he goes off in the lab and he cooks up, a beat and sometimes it takes him a decade to do it. But like, he is, one of the greatest, musicians, of all time. Like, he just creates like these perfect beats. So like, he's obviously, had his NWA career, he's a rapper and makes music himself, but he produces, he's produced Tupac, he's produced Snoop, Eminem, 50 Cent, Kendrick Lamar. Like California Love, like, that's him. That's Dre, He's not only rapping on it, but like the beat, like, that's Dre. Pretty amazing. So Jimmy and Dre have been, business associates, collaborators, and, deep friends for a long time. And in 2006, so this is the actual story of the founding of Beats, which according to Jimmy is completely true. If so, this is certainly the most amazing story. Jimmy's out running on the beach in LA. He's exercising, and Dre is at his beach house. And he sees Jimmy out there, like they're good friends. He's like, hey, Jimmy calls him over, and they start talking. They start chatting, and Dre's like, man, my lawyer called me the other day, and like Nike and Adidas, like they're kind of after me. They want me to sell sneakers. They want me to do a sneaker deal. What do you think? And Jimmy looks at him and he's like, sneakers? Like, Dre, nobody cares what you wear on your feet. Like, you're a recording artist. You're not an NBA player. You shouldn't sell sneakers. You should sell speakers. And Dre looks at him and he's like, you think we can really do that? And Jimmy's like, yeah, like we can definitely do that. And Dre's like, oh yeah, like we could call them beats. Like, that's what I do. I make beats. We could call the speakers beats. and that's how Beats got started on the beach
Legendary.
in LA.
Legendary.
Totally legendary. I think Dre made the right choice, not going with the shoe deal, and instead going with headphones and speakers.
It seems like it. So at this point, is it just Beats electronics? There's no Beats music?
So yeah, the idea, well, we'll get into what happens next in a sec, but I want to step back first, just give a little bit of context. So, Iovine, as we've talked about, he is like the music industry executive. And what he's great at, like we were saying, is like he reinvents himself. He sees the future coming. He goes from Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty and Bruce Springsteen to, Tupac and Snoop and Eminem and Dre. And he sees, this is 2006, like he's known for a while that like the music industry is dead as it once was. It's needs to be transformed. Digital has completely disrupted it. It started with Napster, but then Apple is really big at this point, and with the iPod and the iTunes Store. And Jimmy's actually been he was good friends with Steve Jobs. He got to know Steve and Apple in 2003 when Apple was launching the iTunes Music Store. So Interscope was a big part of that and all of the content. And so Jimmy's been thinking about this for a while. And the thing is that like he knows, I mean, he's an executive, like the whole business model has changed because of digital. It's not just piracy, but it's like now, music is sold as singles, not albums. 1, 2, the entire distribution model. Like it used to be like you needed radio, to get distribution, and then you needed like to get like physical CDs or vinyl or cassettes into stores, and you need to have a relationship with the stores. That's all blown up. Like it's now just, iTunes and other digital platforms. The marketing's totally changed. But what's also happened is that like the channel is much wider, and the relationship between like the artist and the music and the listener, like there's now all those steps that used to be in the middle are now just completely collapsed. So Jimmy's like been thinking about this, and at the same time, he's also close to Apple, and like he's inspired by, what they've done with hardware and with the iPod. And actually, cool aside, I don't know if folks remember, there was a lot of marketing for the iPod with U2, and U2 was like the first product that like U2 ever endorsed. There was the U2 edition iPod. I had it. It was
black
awesome.
with that red scroll wheel.
I had that. It was so cool. That's all like Jimmy, like, cause Jimmy discovered U2, and he's close with them. Like he's the one who made that happen. So he's thinking about all this, and that's like in his mind as they're having this conversation on the beach. So he's thinking about hardware, thinking about Apple, the evolving music industry. So they have the conversation, and a little over a week later, I guess, Jimmy calls, nothing happens. Jimmy calls Dre up, and he says, hey, I want you to come over. And Dre comes over, and Jimmy has gone out and he has bought every single headphone on the market. He's got them like all on a big table. It's like feels like a Johnny Ive like product review, and they listen to him, and he's like, "This is the thing. Like they all suck." They decide they all suck, and it's not because they're not like good technology, but there's 2 problems that they realize with the headphone industry. One, you've got like the headphones that come with the iPod. They're like the earpods, and other bundled headphones. And these things cost like $1 to make. Like they're super low end, and like, they're fine for what they are, but they're just like really cheap. They're not that good. But the other end of the problem, at the high end of the market, to Jimmy and to Dre's mind, they're doing it all wrong. It's these tech companies that are making headphones, and they're making them as reference equipment. And so the idea, like the what audiophiles want, the pristine audio quality, is like reproducing the exact nature of like every sound, every instrument, like exactly as it comes off of the the guitar or the bass or the drum or, the violin or whatever. But they realize like that's not like music isn't technical, it's emotional, right? And so like the experience that most people want when they listen to music is they want to be like emotionally, they want it to be dramatic. They want it to be taken by the music. They don't want it reproduced exactly as it sounded, coming off the instrument. They want it to sound emotional. And that's not what any of these headphones are doing.
And this is the very first point where we realize good headphones and the ideal that Jimmy and Dre were shooting for here is not at all the same thing that audiophiles are shooting for.
Exactly.
They're not a beloved headphone by people that have a certain way to evaluate, are these high quality replica of what happened in the studio headphones.
Exactly. But what Jimmy and Dre realize, and they know from, their experience making popular music, is the audiophile category is like a tiny, tiny, tiny market compared to the rest of the population who wants to experience music, when they're working out, when they're focusing, when they're, whatever. It's part of their life. It's not something they want to like reproduce exactly.
Yeah. It's amazing how there was an opportunity for a brand in a category that was kind of unbranded. The brands there were, I also have a stereo that's Sony, so I have Sony headphones, or I also have a Walkman, so I have Sony headphones, or I have an iPod, so I'm using the stock iPod. It was always like, this is the electronics company that I have for something else, so I got their headphones too. I have no emotional connection, and there's not a lifestyle that I have that's defined by the headphones that I'm using. And no one thought that was a thing. Like people always thought, it's an accessory, or, the very high end people thought, it's a product on its own, but that's not a thing that permeates, life. But it really defined lifestyle and how you wanted to think about yourself when you put on Beats headphones.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's a, also, unlike a tech device that you keep in your pocket or on your desk or whatever, like it's on your body. It's also like a piece of fashion, and it's an advertisement for the brand that you're walking around with every day. So, Jimmy and Dre, they realized this, and he even says like they decided they were going to market the product just like they marketed an artist. Like the product is an artist, and this is totally revolutionary at the time. Like, who would have thought to market headphones like you would market? Like Jimmy says, we decided we were going to market it like it was Tupac or U2 or Guns N' Roses. Like that's not that's not what Sony's doing. That's the business plan. They decide, rather than like trying to make all this hardware ourselves and get into the tech game, we'll just partner with somebody. So they partner with Monster, the high-end cable company. Beats, Dre, and Jimmy and the team, super small team. They design the headphones. They create all the specs. Monster produces them. But what they do, they also do essentially like, what are these guys? They're music guys. They do like artist development. They're treating the headphones like an artist. They do the same thing with the headphones. So like as they're getting prototypes over the next year and a half, like they're bringing them all into the office, into the Interscope office, and they're getting all the artists to like use them and give them feedback. So like every, will.i.am, Gwen Stefani, like all these people, Lady Gaga, they're all like using them, trying them out, giving feedback.
That's like the best way to get sort of early customers or early influencers is like make them feel part of the process, right? That they're involved in, I helped shape this thing. I've known about this since the very beginning. Like, I have, even though they don't actually have skin in the game, they have some sort of reputational or cool factor skin in the game and reason to be super excited and promotional about it when it finally debuts.
Yep. Well, and it's exactly what they do, with artists, right? Like, what did they do with Eminem, right? Like they brought him in, they paired him with Dre, and then like, Eminem's first, songs that came out, like, Dre's in them and Dre did the beats, and like, Eminem learns from Dre, right? But then also like he gets marketed by Dre. Same thing they do with the headphones. So the first product, quote, Beats by Dr. Dre studio headphones.
It was Beats by Dr. Dre?
It was Beats by Dr. Dre in the beginning. Come out late 2008. And this is what they do. They put the headphones in the music videos of all of the artists on Interscope. So it's like, when you do like, whatever song, for a new artist come out and it'll feature Dre on the, the album or whatever, like, this is like a new song, like new headphones coming out, and they're featured on the albums of, on the videos of all these other artists.
That's awesome.
Totally awesome.
What great, unique marketing channel that other people just couldn't possibly have.
Totally. I didn't even think of like, because they're not thinking of headphones, in this way. So then the other thing that they do pretty early on is they give a pair to LeBron James. I think they actually give it to his manager maybe or somehow. Like they get a pair to LeBron. He's like, oh yeah, these are cool. Like, and he's like, tell you what, give me 15 of them. They're like, all right, LeBron, you're like, here you go. Here's 15, pairs of Beats. And this is right before the 2008 Olympics. And next thing they know, the U.S. basketball team shows up for the Olympics in Shanghai. They are all wearing Beats. And
that's a signature of the company now, right? Is like a sports team walking out of the tunnel onto the floor in their warm up stuff, all wearing Beats.
Yep. So they realized that like sports is going to be massive for them. I mean, again, headphones, totally crazy that nobody had thought about marketing headphones and speakers with like musicians before. But what about athletes, right? Like, it goes back to Dre and the shoe deal, like let's market it the same way. So this leads to a couple of years later, the awesome The Hear What You Want commercials that they do, with Richard Sherman and Colin Kaepernick and Kevin Garnett, just so good. And, really a big part of the marketing, especially for people that maybe might not be as much into music or artists particularly, but like are into sports, like it really becomes a lifestyle brand. And then we're skipping ahead a couple of years. We'll come back. But in 2014, the Beats are so popular in the NFL and all these commercials are hitting. The NFL does a deal with Bose headphones and they ban Beats. And Jimmy's like, Jimmy gives an interview about this as it's happening. And there's so much publicity and everybody's talking about it. All the athletes are talking about it. Jimmy's like, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. Like I literally could not have planned this any better.
It's like the narrative of like these rich guys want to come in and pay money so that people can't have what they want. What they want is Beats.
It's like it's like the parallels to when Facebook tried to copy Snapchat with Poke, and it's like you take a step back and you're like, this is the best thing that ever happened to Snapchat.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote-unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
In half! Which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off. And just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
So back to the company story. So they launched the first product in 2008. It's really successful. They're growing, but they're still, they've got this partnership with Monster. Beats itself is a super small company. They're just, they're the brand and they're the design and reference designs. But they decide, they want to grow. So they partner with HTC. And we've referenced this in other episodes, on the Android episode and others. But what was the one we did?
I think it was the HTC Google.
Yeah, HTC Google, yeah. Right. HTC itself. HTC ends up acquiring a majority stake in Beats in August 2010. And they pay $309 million for a 50.1% stake. So the company's valued at over $600 million. As Jimmy talks about it, it's mostly Jimmy because Dre doesn't talk much. Like this is his thing. Like Dre, he's just in the lab. Like he hates talking to anyone, let alone the press. But Jimmy talks a lot. So Jimmy talked about it. He's like, well, I knew the future of music was going to be, on smartphones. And so I thought like we needed to tie up with a smartphone manufacturer to get, our headphones and our technology into these phones. So this is where you have like Beats by Dre HTC Android phones that are coming out for a while, which are hilarious. We totally should we should find somewhere that's like an acquired like museum and put some of these products in there. We could get a Next station. We could get a HTC Beats phone.
Oh yeah, we didn't do an episode on it, but we referenced that HP iPod.
Oh yeah. Oh totally. Oh, and we should get the U2 iPod.
Of course.
Oh, this is great.
Maybe we can finally get all that U2 music off my iPhone that was put on it without my permission.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh, man. That was a disaster.
Yeah. That's
actually a great idea. We should do an acquired museum. If anyone wants to sponsor an acquired museum somewhere.
David, you know what? I hope one day this show gets to the level where we have an actual physical museum. For now, maybe in one of our houses.
You got a dream. Okay, so they do the deal with HTC, and the company Beats continues to grow. It totally overtakes pop culture. I mean, kids everywhere are wearing them. Non-kids are wearing them. They're growing and growing. 2012, Jimmy and Dre kind of realized, like, okay, there's a huge opportunity here. And if we're really going to make this a big company, we got to control our own destiny. We got to kick Monster out and build everything in house. And again, remember, Jimmy, knows everybody at Apple. He's super inspired by them. And this idea of, like hardware and brand and software all together. So they don't renew the partnership with Monster. They move to producing the hardware themselves. Monster, this is just such an example of like the competition these guys were facing in the headphone industry. Monster decides like, oh, we can do this too. We're going to come out with like lifestyle branded headphones and work with artists. So they released Earth, Wind and Fire branded headphones. Now, I love Earth, Wind and Fire. Great group from the 60s and 70s. But like, are you serious? Like
Dre, Earth, Wind and Fire, same resonance, same group of people.
Totally.
Love and have reverence.
Earth, Wind and Fire headphones are totally going to dethrone, Beats by Dre and Richard Sherman and Colin Kaepernick and LeBron James. Like, are you kidding me? To be fair to Monster, they also come out with Miles Davis branded headphones, which, again, like Miles Davis, great. But like, how big is that market versus, LeBron James fans?
Yeah. And I mean, the mark that they miss there is not that like, I love Dr. Dre, so I listen to Beats. It's that Dre is cool and he's behind Beats, and Beats are the brand. Not that like I want to represent Dr. Dre every time I wear my Beats around.
Totally. So then they actually, this is Monster. They end up suing after the Apple acquisition a couple of years later. They end up suing Beats and Apple. They're like, oh, you cheated us out of all this. And Apple's like, this is such a baller move. Apple's like, okay, fine. So they revoke Monster's membership in the like certified Apple accessories. Like, you want to play hardball? We'll play hardball.
Oh, the MFI certified.
Yeah, the MFI certified. And Monster pursues the case. A court eventually throws it out. And like, this is totally baseless case. So
there are, I'm sure, a large group of people in Apple that have like zero respect for what Monster does as a company anyway. And I think it probably felt good just to like be able to stick it to him there. Because I mean, in my mind, the thing that I'll always know Monster for is like complete BS lying to you marketing about the quality of connectors that are no better than the connectors that you could get for something that is a fifth the price, and then charging you $150 for an HDMI cable. I just have to imagine that having recourse to tell that company to stick it somewhere is a nice feeling.
I feel like there was some, I don't know if this has come out in court cases or otherwise, but there must have been some like massive collusion between Best Buy and Monster throughout like all of the 90s about all this stuff. Like, it's digital, right? Like the quality of it's ones and zeros. Like, it's not analog.
It's gold plated. You don't understand.
Oh, God. All right, let's get out of Monster Land. The other part about kind of controlling their own destiny, Jimmy and Jay also realized that like tying up with HTC is not the future here. First, they get HTC to sell back half of their stakes. They own 50.1%. They sell back 25% to the company in 2012. And then in 2013, the Carlyle Group, the big private equity fund, they actually invest $500 million in Beats and use part of that proceeds to buy back all the rest of HTC. So HTC is completely gone by 2013 from the cap table.
Did Jimmy and Dre get any liquidity from that initial 50.1% purchase from HTC? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I suspect so, but I don't know. But apparently, I think when that happened, I could be wrong here, but I think the company was like 5 people. Like, I mean, it was literally just like Jimmy and Dre.
Oh, because all the manufacturing was still contract?
Yeah, it was all done by Monster. So it was just like, the Beats was just doing like the design, the sound tuning, and that was done by, mostly Dre and then the marketing. So it's kind of crazy that like HTC, that you could build such value and that HTC paid, $300 million for half the company with like 5 people.
Yeah. Talk about a talent acquisition.
Yeah, seriously. Well, we'll get into that in a minute.
Actually, that would be kind of a fun, I'd probably not another episode, but it's interesting. We should, when we're classifying what type of acquisition it was for Apple, we should also do that for HTC.
Yeah, totally. Good point. Let's remember to do that. As part of all this, they start producing the products themselves. They're done with Monster. The first in-house Beats products that come out are the Beats Executive headphones first, and the Beats Pill wireless speaker, which was a massive success of a product, is now on multiple generations. The other thing they do as they're doing all this is they acquire a small tech company, a music streaming company called Mog, M-O-G. And this is part of, back to Jimmy's vision about like the whole music industry needs to change. Like he's always wanted, headphones is great. And that was, how they started Beats, but like his vision was like much bigger, that this was going to be his way of riding the next wave in the music industry. So Mog was fairly struggling. I mean, it was at this point, Spotify had entered the US and kind of won the market, but they did some interesting things and they had some definitely good tech talent. So Beats acquires them and starts working on totally redoing the Mog service and rebranding it as Beats Music. So they work on that for about 18 months. And in the meantime, hit over $1 billion revenue run rate just on the headphones. And then in January 2014, they relaunched Mog as the Beats Music streaming service. But the thing that Beats Music has that none of these other streaming services have that they think is really important is they have actual involvement by the artists themselves. So there's like playlists that are made, there's recommendation, curation by Dre, by the Interscope artist, by Jimmy. Everybody else is just an algorithm at this point. And Dre and Jimmy think this is the future.
Yeah, and this is, I'll borrow from Tech Themes ahead now, but this is the Jimmy Iovine vision that manifests in multiple forms. That's really respect the artist, keep the artist involved. It's all about the artist. In fact, in the Defiant Ones documentary, there's a quote from him where he's like, people like to attribute things I did to me and success to producers, and producers try and take credit for that a lot of the time. It's 99.9% the artist, and you got to respect that and you got to understand that, and that's what makes a great producer. And it's interesting looking at the streaming service and saying, the artists need more involvement with this human curation. So foreshadowing the Beats One radio, it's human curated, and that's actually a value proposition rather than algorithmically selected, or in fact, not even algorithmically selected and just showing you, huge lists of song for you to search and browse through. And then, a tenet of Jimmy's as Beats would grow later is we don't have a freemium tier. I mean, we'll talk a lot about this, but like, artists get paid for music, and that's final. And that's his party line through and through, and really sets him apart from a lot of the other sort of disruption that's happening in the space.
Yep. Well, and just the whole ethos, again, getting back to the headphones of like, music is personal, music is emotional, music is not technical. And I think that's part of the vision here too, is like, your music service, you don't want an algorithm, queuing up what's next. You want like Dre queuing up what's next. You want Stevie, queuing up what's next.
Maybe we'll see. My Discover Weekly is really good.
Well, totally. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is Jimmy's, vision, and certainly for a big part of the market, I think that resonates. We'll get to the end of the story here now, and the end is kind of just as fun. It might also be the coolest end to a acquisition story that we'll ever have on Acquired, certainly thus far. So May 8th, 2014. Remember, in January, they launch Beats Music just a couple months before. So a few months go by, May. The Financial Times reports, breaks the news that apparently Apple, Jimmy's old friends, are in negotiations to buy Beats for $3.2 billion. And this would be the largest acquisition in Apple's history by literally an order of magnitude. So the previous largest was the next acquisition, which we covered, which was just over $400 million. This would be, Apple doesn't do things like this. It's huge news. And it's true, negotiations are going on, but they're not done yet. And so Jimmy calls up Dre and he's like, all right, this came out. Like, we got, like, this is Apple. They're so secretive. Like, they could walk at any moment. Like, we know these guys. Like, we got to keep quiet until this is done. Like, you can't say anything. Just keep it on the DL. Like, be completely, like, do not do anything. Dre's like, yeah, gotcha. So Dre's in the studio that weekend and he's hanging out with friends. And one of his friends is the actor and singer Tyrese Gibson. They're hanging in the studio and they're talking about this. Of course, like, what are you going to talk about? Like, you're about to sell their company for, $3.2 billion. And they're excited and it's late at night and they're drinking, they get drunk. And Tyrese, pulls out his phone and makes a video of all of them and they're celebrating and Tyrese says, like, the Forbes list just came out. They're going to have to, like, new information. They got to change the Forbes list. And then Dre pops up and he's like, first billionaire in hip hop right here. and they're like, or they're partying, whatever. They go to bed.
So cringeworthy.
That night, 4 a.m., so early morning, Jimmy calls up Dre and he's like, what the, F, like, it's like, what the heck are you doing? And Dre's like, what do you mean? And Jimmy's like, that video. And Dre's like, well, what do you mean? And Jimmy's like, Tyrese posted it to Facebook. And this was right when Facebook video was, like, launching. So people didn't really understand, like, what Facebook video was. And so obviously, it's on the internet. Now, they don't actually say that Apple is acquiring Beats, but, like, it's strongly implied here, especially corroborating this article. So there's some rockiness to the deal. And
honestly, I can't believe Apple still went through with it.
I can't either. But they do. But, supposedly, like, it was, as the Financial Times was reporting, beginning of May, it's close to done. Nothing gets announced until the end of May. So May 28th, 20 days later. And when it gets announced, Apple is doing the acquisition for $3 billion, not $3.2 billion. Nobody discusses why, and there's speculation. Well, it could be that the Beats Music subscriber numbers were actually a little lower than, they thought they will. Maybe it's the Tyrese video. We'll never know, but pretty hilarious.
I mean, it really shows a few things. One, how badly Apple wanted to do what they were going to do with Apple Music and how integral they viewed Beats in doing that. Two, the power of Jimmy and his relationships. The characteristic Apple we know of, it's done. Like, you messed up. We're no longer moving forward with this. You've proved yourselves to be people that we can't trust to sort of live the Apple way.
And lead a huge part of the company going from. This is the largest acquisition by an order of magnitude that Apple's ever made.
Yep.
So the day it gets announced is actually the Recode conference is going on. Code conference is going on. And so Jimmy and Eddie Q. So Eddie Q's always been the media and content guy at Apple. And the day the deal gets announced, he's scheduled to be interviewed on stage at the Code conference by Kara Swisher and Walt Mossberg. And the deal gets announced, right? So he and Jimmy come up on stage together, and they're interviewed by Kara and Walt, and they're like, "Wow, this is big news." But people knew it was coming. But the thing that Jimmy, makes the point, and Eddie both several times in this interview, is like, this didn't happen overnight. That Jimmy had been working with Apple and with Eddie for over a decade, going back to the launch of the iTunes Music Store. And so to your point, Ben, I mean, the relationships, like, that's got to be what saved the deal here.
Yeah. God, to be a fly on that wall, to understand the phone call that Eddie Q makes to Jimmy.
Or to Dre.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
I kind of hope that Eddie just called Dre up.
I know, right? In the Defiant ones, they do talk a lot about, and I haven't finished it yet, but in the at least in the first part of it, they talk a lot about how Jimmy finds out and talking with Dre about it. We don't hear at all what the communication from Apple is like, and so there's still the core of Apple in there.
They're really like, somebody someday should do like a book and like go in and research like all like the actual stories behind all this stuff at Apple. It leaks out a little bit over the years as things get older, but there's so many of these that there should be an actual historian go in and like do this at some point.
Yeah, great point. So at this point, the acquisition, it's actually two LLCs. It's Beats Electronics LLC and Beats Music LLC. And I remember when I first heard the news, it not being totally clear to me which was more valuable, more strategic, why Apple was actually doing this. I mean, to me, it seemed like Beats Music was, it had some people using it, but like clearly not going to be a winner. Like Spotify was going to be a winner. It paled in comparison to people still doing the 99-cent thing from Apple. Like the headphones were super popular and permeated pop culture and seemed to be doing really well. So I think in my head, at the time of the acquisition, before Apple Music was announced, I'd sort of chalk that up to like, okay, they bought the headphones company.
Yep, totally. The sort of coda here is just over a year later, Apple Music launches, Apple's first streaming service, and it is a rebranded and revamped Beats Music, including the Beats One radio station. That's part of it. That's hosted by Dre and other artists, and so that launched, and that becomes Apple's primary music offering. But then also, as we know, Ben is wearing them right now, Apple has gone much deeper into headphone technology over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I'd say we did a good amount of research. Not totally clear how much the Beats folks were involved in the AirPods design. I mean, I think there's a little bit of crossover, but Apple actually doesn't influence the Beats hardware stuff very much. I think they're taking advantage of some economies of scale and some innovation where they're sharing things between those two. For example, the W1 chip that's in the AirPods appears also in the most recent Beats wireless headphones. But for the most part, I believe it's Apple's existing hardware teams continuing to work on the AirPods and Beats hardware teams continuing to push the ball forward on Beats headphones. And there was some layoffs in the consolidation. They laid off, I believe, 200 people in combining the companies. But
yep. Well, this is probably a good segue into acquisition category, and we can get into some of the numbers of analyzing the deal later in grading and other segments. But I think it comes down to like, what was this acquisition? I mean, for me, I was thinking about it like it actually kind of fits a bunch of our categories. Like, it's a business line for sure. Like, Apple now owns Beats. They're selling Beats headphones,
which in itself is over $1 billion. I mean, even before the acquisition, I think this is 2013, 2014 numbers, but over $1 billion in revenue just on the headphones.
Yep, totally. And that's when Apple acquired the company. It's also an asset. It's the brand of Beats for sure. As we talked about, that's was at the time and still is a huge part of pop culture that Apple's getting access to. But I think it's also like, if I had to choose one, I think it's actually people. And I think, there's a lot of really, in some ways, kind of funny and unexpected parallels to the next acquisition here. And, Steve Jobs coming back to Apple. I wouldn't put Jimmy and Dre's impact at Apple anywhere near the level of Steve Jobs, but it is an impact for sure. And there's that long relationship. And I think it comes back to the AirPods too. Like, whether or not the Beats team was involved in the AirPods, it is this like view of what is, audio, what is music? Is it something technical, or is it something that's like part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a scattering of categories. The way that I was thinking about this acquisition and how to do the analysis, I sort of discarded the headphones line of business. I mean, yes, it's a brand and it's a great source of revenue, and it's only continued to improve since they bought it. Though they don't break it out, I think Beats has become more and more prominent over the years. What they, in my mind, bought was two things. It's one, an existing app and service that was well done, so that they didn't have to start from scratch in house. You could imagine Apple being, knowing they were going to do Apple Music and knowing that they wanted to compete with Spotify in this world where a thing they pioneered, music over the internet, was being largely disrupted, and they needed to become a player in the changing world. They totally could have done it on their own.
Yep. Well, but also Apple, I mean, in the Sound Jam episode, which is like totally the precursor to this episode, they made the same decision. Like, let's buy a good technical service and use that as a starting point.
Right. And so that's not worth $3 billion for sure.
Totally. That's where I was going.
Sound Jam is worth, what was Sound Jam is
I think we
talent
decided
acquisition.
like 10 million or less.
So, yeah. One piece of analysis that I read was consider if they had decided to do it on their own to compete, let me paint this picture. A competitor of theirs rises to prominence using their own devices as distribution in a service that people consider core to their lives. And this analysis was talking about Google Maps. Apple decides to do something on their own to compete and comes out with Apple Maps. And there's, a large debate over how that's going.
Although I think a lot more people use Apple Maps than at least in the tech world, we give it credit for.
Right. There's also an element of Apple. They're not great at social. They're not great at services compared to other companies. So there's a lot of risk in them having complete and total control to shape the product of what does this service look like. And by buying, Beats Music, they had a really good starting point. Now, again, none of this is worth $3 billion. Some of that is because the headphones business was already doing great. So anybody who wanted to just buy that thing would have to pay $1 billion or more for that on its own. Then when you layer on, okay, great, we're going to get this scaffolding of a great music service. So call that a technology. I'd say product, but let's say product. What you really need on top of that to make the whole thing tick and to really start competing with Spotify is Jimmy's relationships and Beats, Dre and Jimmy's position within the industry. And so to enable that sort of technology product that they built to really start to be differentiated and scale, is the talent there.
I totally agree, but I would even go one step farther. I think maybe this is heresy, given, like we're talking about the way audiophiles view, Beats and whatnot, headphones. But I actually think there are a lot of parallels here to the Instagram acquisition of Facebook. I'm just going to paint this picture. Who knows if it would have been successful, how long it would have taken. I think Beats could have been a serious threat to Apple in the long term. Jimmy and Dre, and particularly Jimmy, well, maybe Dre too. He just doesn't talk much, so we don't know. But they had a vision, right, of what was Beats and what was this combination. Jimmy talks about it all the time in these interviews, like how much he idolized, he respected Steve Jobs' view of technology plus liberal arts. And you could argue with how well Beats did on that, but that was the driving vision. It was we're not just a headphones company. We're not just a tech company. We're also not just a music company. We are part of your life. And the relationship that we have to our customers is super deep. And that's exactly what Apple is too, right? So maybe we're bleeding into what would have happened otherwise now, but say this acquisition hadn't happened. What does Beats look like now? What does Beats look like in 10 years as a standalone company? Just like Apple started with, let's take, Apple version 2, after Steve Jobs comes back, starts with a MP3 player, oh yeah, that's nice. Apple's doing consumer electronics now. That's cute. Now Apple's the biggest company in the world and the most personal relationship with billions of people around the world. Maybe headphones was the way that Beats could have done that too.
It's interesting to think about, especially in the future that we've painted on other episodes where a headphones and a watch or a headphones and a wearable in some way are the new phone. But you sort of do need to be the ecosystem owner of all of those things in order to do that. And Apple, I think it's pretty hard to be a new entrant to compete with Apple there.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think Beats would have had a really hard time technologically doing it on their own without Apple, right? But this is where it comes back to the AirPods, right? And like, where is computing going? Where is technology going? But also, where is like, where is society? Where are the liberal arts going? Like, and that's why you're back to the people, the relationships, like you're saying, like Jimmy and Dre, like they understand why people use things. Like people buy headphones and listen to music because of the emotional, impact of the music, not because of the tech specs, like, and I think that's what Apple got so right about the iPhone, right? Like, it's not about like, the talk show talks about this all the time. Like Apple doesn't market on speeds and feeds. Like it markets on like how this impacts your life. To me, that's like the biggest thing here is a people deal. And that's why this is a $3 billion acquisition and Apple's largest ever. And that's why SoundJam was a, acqui-hire.
Wow. It's a bold statement. If you were to attribute, I'm sure there is actual models with attribution to this. If you were to attribute that $3 billion allocated across Beats Electronics and Beats Music, how would you do it?
I don't think Apple would do that. And I don't think that's how you should think about it. Because it's about like, again, it's about like the AirPods, like, which isn't Beats at all, right? But it's about like what this vision can get to and how Beats as a company, Beats as a brand, Jimmy and Dre as leaders can help Apple, get there.
And they just happen to bring a lot of really helpful assets along the way.
Yeah, but you can't value the assets, right? Like, again, back to SoundJam. Like, SoundJam had no brand. SoundJam had no, like, they had customers who like used the product and liked it, right? But like, it wasn't like the NFL wasn't banning SoundJam, right?
Man. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm definitely out on a limb here, but I think it's true, right? Like, because the question is, why did Apple pay $3 billion for Beats and $3 million for SoundJam?
Right. All right, I'll roll with you there.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. Like, the risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Before we go into what would have happened otherwise, why don't I catch us up a little bit on how is Apple Music doing and what did the world of streaming services, how did that evolve? So let's rewind to before the Beats acquisition. So Spotify had collected 20 million paying subscribers, while Apple had no offering in the market. And they're the pioneers of digital music legal digital music. And here they are sitting there while they're being completely disrupted. In fact, Pandora even grabbed 80 million active listeners, and it looks like about 4 million paying subscribers. Still, Apple's doing nothing. So Spotify's got this huge free tier with 20 million paying. Pandora's got 4 million-ish paying. if you fast forward to today, what has sort of happened with Apple Music, they obviously launched in 2015. They now have 30 million paying subscribers, no free tier, just I think free trial. That's right, the 30-day free trial. And where Spotify is that Spotify has about twice that. They've got about 60 million paying subscribers and over 60 million who are free. So Spotify has about double the listener base that Apple does. If you consider, and there's this amazing chart on Asimco that we'll link to in the show notes called Growth of Music Subscribers. Apple Music has basically been growing linearly since launch. After 12 months, they were at about it looks like about 14 million subscribers. After 24 months, they were at about 26, and here we are around 36 months, where they've just crossed the 30 threshold, and so they're growing much faster than Spotify, who took years and years and years to get to 30 million. But now Spotify is really starting to sort of hit their acceleration in their exponential curve. So still a very fierce battle. While Apple, if you consider a number of months since launch, is way out ahead, but obviously Spotify launched way earlier and is now accelerating at sort of breakneck speed to actually convert their free tier to paid tier. We're in this world today where Spotify is preparing for some kind of liquidity. A lot of people are speculating that it's going to be a direct listing and go public. There's talk of it being a $20 billion market cap for that company when they do a direct listing. And they are accelerating faster than Apple Music is in terms of paid subscribers right now. And there's a very philosophical difference between Spotify's ad-supported sort of freemium tier that converts to paid, or Jimmy Iovine's "we don't give away music." We charge for music and we give it to the artists. And Apple is sort of okay with growing more slowly, or has sort of taken the position that we're okay growing more slowly because we have a more sustainable model that rewards everyone fairly. And honestly, Apple's got the cash pile where it can be a loss leader for Apple. And of course they make money on it. If you look and see what the margins look like, Apple Music, it looks like operates around a 42% gross margin when you're just working off of the fees that they're paying to the record label. So there's obviously other costs in there. So they pay 58% to the record labels. Spotify actually pays less. Spotify pays, they've dropped it from 55% down to 52%. And so Apple's paying 58% to the record label. So the labels look at Apple Music and at Jimmy as, hey, this is a thing that's better for us. They have a strategy that's better for us where Apple doesn't need to make as much margin on this thing. They're doing better by the artists. So it'll be really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out between Apple Music and Spotify with different philosophies. Apple way late to this market, but obviously with a huge cash pile to be able to fight.
Well, I'd say two things. I mean, one, it's also interesting to just think about the numbers and relative to, maybe we're foreshadowing ahead a bit to grading, but Apple Music has 30 million subscribers right now at $10 a month. Now, some of them are on the free trial and whatnot. So a discount, hyper aggressive discount of say that, 2/3 of that is like 1/3 is not paying the full $10 a month. They also have family plans where you can get the whole family on for $15 a month. So we'll be aggressive. I'm sure it's not quite a third that they're losing, but say it's a third. So they have 20 million people paying $10 a month. That's $200 million a month at a roughly 50% gross margin. So $100 million a month gross margin contribution to Apple. That's over $1 billion a year. That's pretty good for paying, $3 billion for Beats. So financially, that's pretty good. But also I think I do really believe there's this other part of the story to music. It's not just music. It's not just Spotify versus Apple. It's the whole ecosystem and the impact on your life. So Apple Music is smaller than Spotify for sure. But with Apple Music, you have there's Beats, right? And if you use Beats headphones, that's partially maybe important to you, at least from a brand standpoint. But then there's also just things like the watch, right? And now Apple Music on the watch. And it's and with AirPods. And so now you can just start to get this integration into your life, like I was talking about earlier, in a way that's just part of a larger product and being part of your customer's life that Spotify will never be part of.
It's very Steve Jobs of you. It's very like,
I mean, this is Apple's largest acquisition ever, right? Like,
yeah, it's all about the music. And another interesting thing, I should just point this out, when I was diving into this, is there's a great Quartz article that's called 90% of revenue comes from 30% of Spotify's users. If you look at it, like, they probably have about twice as many free as they do paid. So that's sort of a 1/3, 2/3 thing. 90% of their revenue comes from that smaller group of paid subscribers. So if you're ever thinking like, boy, it really seems like they want me to upgrade to this paid tier, they're not making jack off of you as a listening to ads. That's really just a way to subsidize, like, we don't want to lose too much money on giving this away free.
Yeah, interesting. The other player we absolutely should, mention here is Amazon. Like, Amazon's making a huge push with Amazon Music, and including, so there's 2 tiers of Amazon Music. There's Prime Music, included for free in Prime, which is streaming of a couple million songs. So nowhere near as large a library as Spotify or Apple, but like enough for people who don't care that much about music. Like, I could pay $10 a month, or I could get this included in my Prime subscription. And then Amazon also has Music Unlimited, which is a direct competitor to Apple Music and Spotify, which is also priced cheaper at, I think, $7 or $8 a month. And this is where, right, like, I would rather be Apple than Spotify in this situation, because Spotify has to now deal with competing directly with Amazon. But Apple and Beats don't compete directly with Amazon.
Yeah. Spotify is in the unfortunate middle here. Either compete with Apple head on or compete with Amazon head on, but you don't want to be kind of caught in the middle.
All right. Well, I feel like we've done category and what would have happened otherwise. Should we do tech themes quickly?
Ooh, what would have happened otherwise? Could Apple have successfully created Apple Music without acquiring Beats?
Oh, yeah, of course they could have.
What would it be missing?
Let's look at like what Apple's starting to do in video, or Amazon too. Like, right, like the best Apple I think could have done without Beats is what Amazon's done. Is like totally serviceable service, right? And that's part of the larger ecosystem, and that's great. But by bringing on Beats, they got a couple of things, like we've talked about. They got the existing customer base. Now, most of those were headphones, right? But like millions and millions and millions of people that identify with the brand and have a relationship with the brand.
But Apple Music is definitely not the Beats brand. Like, you don't get that for free.
Totally. You don't, but they could draw a lot of that customer base into it. But then also they get they get a vision for it, right? Like in what Jimmy, has articulated. And again, like, has it been as successful thus far as it could be or will be in the fullness of time? I don't know. But I don't think they would have had that without a leader, like leaders like Jimmy and Dre to come in and do it. Again, because it's all about the artists and the marketing. And so you need to be like Eddie Q going and being that leader in the music industry is incredible,
Yeah. In fact, he's feared in many ways by what he did last time around. To pin that down a little bit more, is the service worse? So there is more churn. So I guess what I'm getting at is they already had like the best channel you could possibly have to try and sell people a music service by being baked into the platform. Would they be sitting at 30 million subscribers today if they tried to do this without Jimmy and Dre?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But I don't think they would have, as you pointed out, like Apple's relationship with the music industry and with artists was tenuous at times. And now it's much, much better.
Right. Well, if they had waited a couple more years, I guess they could have bought Tidal.
They could have. That's true.
Yeah. All right. Tech themes.
That would be a fun show.
Yeah.
Tech themes. All right. So one for me is just like technology and the liberal arts. And obviously, as you guys can tell from this episode, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid here. I mean, how could we not? It's an Apple show. But two, one I want to talk about is this actually is totally similar to the Stitch Fix IPO for me. Like that Jimmy and Dre saw something that was overlooked in the market and built a business around that, and had an insight that nobody else had. And this is really like going back to business school. One of my professors was Andy Ratcliffe, who was one of the founders of Benchmark, and he talked about he took this from Howard Marks at Oaktree. This idea of like a 2x2 matrix when you think about investing or building companies. You can be right or you can be wrong in what you're doing. That's like, one of the axes of the 2x2 matrix. And obviously you want to be right, not wrong. If you're wrong, you lose money no matter what. But if you're right, you only make money in one circumstance. You could be right and it could be consensus that that's what's going to happen. You actually don't make any money in that scenario because you're not doing anything like different or outsized or, whatnot. Where you make money is when you're right and it's non-consensus. And that's what Stitch Fix did, right? Like women don't need a, personal shopping clothes service. Well, actually turns out they do, and with Beats and headphones, it was like, well, people who are audiophiles, like, the high-end music market, they want totally fidelity, accurate reproduction of the sound. Well, it turns out they don't, So I think this is like a great illustration of that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great parallel. And it's a better dive into something that I was thinking about is defining a lifestyle brand where there previously was no lifestyle brand. Like realizing that a category is something that can play an important role and define people's lives rather than just being throwaway. It's certainly worth looking around and considering where are there other opportunities to do that.
And Jimmy talks about this. He's like, he says, he refers to it as he and Dre, they look for holes out there. Like, where is there a hole? And this is the same thing.
God, they're great VCs, man.
Totally. Well, that's what they did. I mean, like, Jimmy, his whole career, and then Dre, as he's become more of a producer and less of a, direct artist himself, like, that's what they do. They find talent and they identify it. They found U2, right? Like they found Eminem, and then they give it the resources to succeed. That's like, these guys are VCs. They are great VCs.
Well, here's another one. And that it was something we've been talking about on a previous show, but the content is king narrative. Where, we're talking about it's these guys and it's their vision and their relationships. What that really leads to is having the best content.
Yep. Well, and that's what Apple Music wouldn't have without this.
Right. And does this now put us in a world, fast forward to today, Apple's, investing $1 billion into original programming. First of all, I'm very curious to see if that will be released. It's obviously video original programming under the Apple Music moniker. Much like, are they going to overload it the same way that they did iTunes and make iTunes your rich multimedia hub when it was originally about music? Apple is now well positioned with a subscriber base of 30 million people to actually have a credible offering of, hey, pay X dollars per month the way that you do to Netflix, and we'll be able to put great content on your device. It's interesting to see Apple spanning across modalities doing this. They may have a service much like Prime, that is, you pay X dollars per month to Apple and you get the full Apple Music, you get all of our original programming, you get access to other videos or other TV shows that are on demand. It's Apple taking advantage of the vertical integration that they have and saying, look, everybody, we're gonna pour a new for pay services tier on top of everybody that's already in our massively integrated Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, it's interesting too to think about like Apple versus Amazon here, because they're taking the total opposite approaches, and like they'll both be very. This is why they're perhaps the two most valuable companies in the world right now. I think like Amazon is like, we're just gonna like, the Jeff Bezos, your margin is my opportunity, right? Like I'm gonna fly so close to the ground on all of these things that in aggregate, like I make a ton of money, but nobody can compete with me on any individual aspect. I would be. We'll cover Spotify someday in another episode, but like I would be terrified if I'm Spotify. Like Amazon is now giving away what most of my users, pay me for. And Apple takes the opposite approach, which is like, I'm going to create this entire ecosystem. You're going to pay a lot of money for access to it. You're going to get an iPhone 10. You're going to get an Apple Watch with cellular. You're going to get AirPods. And then I'm going to have all these services too and content around it. And like, but I'm going to be your best friend and constant companion in your life,
This just occurred to me. So I mentioned Apple, Apple's a highly, highly vertically integrated company, unlike, Google or Amazon that's going across devices and not necessarily married to the specific hardware that you pay them for. So Apple's business model has always been make really great devices that are differentiated by their software and services and sell them for an excellent premium. They've been selling this services narrative recently that is on their earnings call every time. It's Apple is transitioning to a services company. Look at all these services, blah, blah, blah. The numbers on that look like If we say that Apple Music revenue is about $3-ish billion a year, based on their 30 million subscribers, their last 4 quarters of services revenue have been about $28 billion. So Apple Music's still small. The vast majority of that still comes from iOS app downloads. When you think about what their total annual revenue looked like, it was $216 billion. So, most of their, I know, right?
These numbers are just laughable, by the
way. Most of their revenue still comes from their core business model, but certainly a fast growing segment of services revenue. The number one thing that really drives that home for me is there's an Apple Music Android app, and it's not nearly as widely used, I don't think, as the one for iOS. Like if you're in the Android ecosystem, are you really likely to pay for Apple Music and make that your choice instead of Amazon or Google or Spotify? But that still is very puzzling to me and a very interesting hedge on their classic business model to build and maintain an Android user base on Apple Music.
Yeah, it's super different, even from all the things we were just talking about, right?
And I'll say, this is I think it's a departure from, and I love this. This is always a hilarious thing when people bring this up, and I usually get mad at them, but I'll do it anyway. Think about what would Steve Jobs have done, or would Steve Jobs have done this if he was still alive? I mean, there was a Windows iTunes app, but that was all about, and a Windows Safari app, but the Windows iTunes app was all about being able to get people's foot in the door in the Apple ecosystem, get them to buy an iPod so they could see the Apple, see the Apple light, and then perhaps buy a Mac. And, they made good money on the iPods too, and really a foot in the door into the Apple ecosystem. Is that the same thing that we're seeing here with Apple Music, where if you're an Apple Music customer on Android, then it's a foot in the door in the Apple ecosystem and maybe you'll go buy some of their high margin hardware? I don't think so. I think it's more like we see an opportunity to have a great business as a services company.
It's a little more muddled, but there is some element. I mean, you might go buy some Beats headphones or AirPods. AirPods, work with Android too. Not as integrated or as well.
Yeah, how many people have you seen with AirPods that have an Android phone?
I haven't seen many, but how often do you meet somebody in your work life who doesn't have an iPhone?
In esports, a lot.
In esports, a lot. Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, should we bring this one on home?
Let's do it.
So let's see. I'll go first on grading. I've been I think pretty laudatory of this deal thus far for Apple, and I'm going to continue to do so. I mean, as I think about some of the acquisitions I compared it to Instagram and Next, which are our references for an A+ on this show. I think did we give Instagram an A+ when we did it? We got to go back and redo that episode because it was our first one.
Yeah.
If we didn't, we should have.
I think that would actually make it the third time that we've done it, including the unreleased pilot.
Oh yeah, and the unreleased pilot. Oh man, that goes in the acquired museum.
That's right.
So I think this is kind of in that category. I don't think the execution though has been as good as Instagram and Next, and specifically. Well, Next was its own beast. That was Steve. Instagram, the thing that made Instagram, all these dynamics were at play there. It's reinventing, what is Facebook, right? Facebook, it's photos, right? And let's make Instagram that. And all the growth, and how much Instagram is worth now and plugging into the ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. The thing about Beats, it's not, as we've been talking about here, it's not as clear, what the vision is and how it evolves. The vision was there. Jimmy and Dre had the vision. And it's now gotten a little bit diluted as part of Apple. I think it's still there, but it's not this is not an A+. You can't point to this. You can point to Instagram and be Instagram is now worth $100+ billion. You can't say that with Beats for sure. So I think I go A- thus far.
I'm going to go A- too. Just basically from a cash flow perspective, will this thing pay for itself, and has it paid for itself in a reasonable time frame? Yeah, I feel great about that. Has it been absolutely transformative to their business? No, but has it been has it helped Apple evolve their digital music to this decade of what digital music means, when digital music is a core part of Apple and their business and their what their customers do with their devices? Absolutely. I'm between B+ and A-, but I'm going to go A- because I'm encouraged by the fact that we're a few years in. It's still growing strong. You know, they did manage to very quickly get 30 million paying subscribers on this thing. I think it's laudable.
Well, and I think maybe this is where we disagree. I think everything you say, but I think it's not just digital music. There is this element of like what the vision is for the future of, you know, computing in society here. And like, I don't want to say that, like, certainly as we've talked about, like the Beats team did not like directly lead to the AirPods, but it's just part of the mindset, right? Like audio quality and music's a big part of that, but also podcasts, you know, also everything. Like this is part of people's lives and was being more so. And like the more you can integrate technology and that, whether, you know, Steve Jobs called it liberal arts, or, you know, when Jimmy talks about culture and cool and understand, like the more you can integrate that, like, and understand it, like the more successful you're going to be. All right, there we have it.
Carve outs.
Our 50th episode.
Yep.
Cool. Carve outs. I'll go quickly. The same theme, you know, Jimmy and what an amazing person he is. And I talked about the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar book about his relationship with John Wooden, I think last time or the time before. I also read John Wooden on Leadership, a book by John Wooden, where he talks about his pyramid of success. Just so cool. And I think like John and Jimmy are both people that have like been incredibly successful at the very, very top of their industry across multiple complete sea changes in what that industry is around them. Just super cool to like learn about those people and how they did it. So John Wooden, Jimmy Iovine, separated at birth.
Awesome. David, are you playing HQ?
No.
Have you heard about this?
No.
So it's this incredibly fast-growing consumer phenomenon that has a 250,000 people concurrently playing when it's live. It is a game show that happens interactively through your phone that comes on twice a day. And it is from the creators of Vine. And it is basically a host who comes on, asks you questions, very simple, awesome UI. You get to answer the questions, and you progress to the end where there's a cash prize that gets split the number of ways of however many winners there are. And there will be like 250,000 people concurrently, you know, and this thing's like a month or two old. It's crazy. 250,000 people concurrently in there answering the questions. You basically see how far you can get, and the questions get progressively more difficult, and they go from like piece of cake to very impossible very fast. But if you're left standing at the end, then you split the cash prize, and that can be anywhere from $250 to I think the biggest they've done is like $2,000-$3,000. And
it's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
It is, and there's so many like startup things to take from it. Like they have this great. I mean, it's a great acquisition hack of literally giving away money, and the number of people that it's bringing on relative to the small amount that they're giving away. Even let's say it's $2,500, super low cost of customer acquisition. And it's really fun, really poppy. The founders not only created Vine, but had a couple of failed things in the interim that this is sort of pivoted from. So it's really cool to read the backstory. There's been a lot of controversy. If you want to look up HQ News, there's been some all sorts of interesting controversy about the company that I won't go into. But their backstory of trying really new interactive models that are fun on your phone with video, it's just cool to watch, and it's cool to see that they found something that's like really, really hitting, and it's super fun. So every day at noon, you can go in and play the live interactive game show on your phone.
Cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. I heard that there was something new from the founders of Vine, but now I know what it is.
Yeah, we'll play it and tell me how far you get.
Probably not far. Unless the questions are about John Wooden and Jimmy Iovine.
That's right. That's right. All right, listeners.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, StatSig.
Yes, long-time acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on StatSig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where StatSig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you like the show, rate us on iTunes, and have a great day.
See you next time.